She asked for a job. What the rancher offered was something far deeper. Before we begin, comment your country so I know where the story is reaching. The sunrise looked like a promise someone had whispered and then forgotten. Light crept slow over the ridgeline, thin as a rumor, turning frost into filigree. Lena Mercer stepped from the stagecoach with a single satchel and a face that had learned to keep its business private. Her boots left small, decisive prints in the yard. Her hands were steady. Her need was not talkative. The Garland place sat broadened against the wind, a rectangle of weathered boards and stoops and chimneys that breathed steam into the cold. A ribbon of smoke rose from a distant cookhouse. A horse called, somewhere out of sight. A dog slept on the porch like a punctuation mark. He was on that porch, a long figure in a dark coat. Dane Garland watched the road the way a man watches a ledger, numbers and losses mapped in his bones. When Lena walked up the path, the morning light caught the line of his cheek. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. He simply said, "I hear you want work." Her reply was short, like everything useful should be. "I'll earn my keep." He led her through rooms with furniture that remembered better times, past a parlor with a piano whose keys had not been touched in years. No idle hospitality here. The house had a rhythm of economy and silence. He told her where the stove lived. He told her there were 3 mouths at supper and a pack of men who'd been eating 2 days on bread gone dry. Her hands found the tools without asking. Flour turned under her fingers the way speech does, into something that comforts and quiets. By the time the light softened into afternoon, the stew simmered into a map of small mercies. They ate. No one clapped. They ate like people who expect little and measure gratitude by empty plates. Ellen came to the table with tea and a careful smile. There was a knot under her collarbone, the way someone keeps a secret folded inside a hand. She moved with the practiced caution of a person who learned to weigh every word. When she looked at Lena, the look was not hunger or suspicion. It was survival recognizing survival. Outside, the wind gathered gossip from the hills and threw it toward the barn. Lena learned the chores in the window between hours, sweeping, mending, watching water boil until the kettle sang. She learned the quiet ways of a place that keeps its own counsel. Dane spoke little. When he did, his voice carried the kind of weight that made you measure your own sentences. There was a rumor town had nothing but dusty memories. Then a rumor came through the kitchen, small and sharp as a chip of glass. Lena had worked at a place people rolled their tongues around like a bad coin. It clung to her like thin smoke, more a thing to be endured than explained. She could have swallowed it. She chose to keep her hands on the work instead. Men muttered at the table. They shifted. Empty chairs seemed to leer. Lena's back straightened like a fence in a windstorm. She did not ask for explanation. She didn't need to. She proved by doing. Dane's watchfulness changed. It became less like a scrutiny and more like a slow, careful inventory. He carried water before she asked. He left a clean bar of soap by the basin. Small things, corridor lighting, a warm blanket folded at her door. That might mean nothing on paper, but meant a quiet lot inside the ledger of a life that had run out of gentleness. Night brought trouble not as violence, but as a memory of failure. A barn ember traveled where a man had stacked drywood against the wall and thought the wind wouldn't notice. Smoke screamed up. Flames nipped like a sudden temper. Lena woke to the taste of iron and the cry of an alarmed rooster. Dane moved without bravado. He moved with a kind of efficacy born from having done the hard thing too often. He carried Lena from the kitchen before the smoke could find her lungs. He barricaded doors. He did not shout. He simply shut down the blaze the way a man closes ledger entries, precise, necessary, and slow to forgive himself later. When the embers died and the smell of charred coffee faded, Lena sat on the stoop with her hands wrapped around a tin cup and watched him measure the damage. He had stood under his nails and a rub where a spark had grazed his cheek. His silence then was not the same as before. It had an edge, like a man who had been late to do the one thing he remembered best. Later, a small bundle appeared on Lena's doorstep. Eggs from the hen house, a loaf, a square of muslin wrapped snug. No name, no fanfare. Ellen, whose fingers trembled around China, had left it. Lena held the bundle like a small violation and a small grace. The days made room for other things. She taught Ellen the bread that rose like a hopeful secret. She learned the names of the men who came and went, the crooked ones and the kind ones. She listened to stories that fell over coffee, horse trades, fences fixed, snowstorms that never quite ended, and she learned where Dane kept his ledger. One evening, when a low sun turned the field to a smear of orange, Lena found Dane sitting on a sagging fence, fist gone white around a pipe he wasn't smoking. She sat beside him, not close enough to be comforting, not distant enough to be sharp, for a long while they watched cattle chew their own shadows. Then he said, "I once walked away from something I should have fixed." Her reply was a small, careful thing. "We all walk away sometimes." He laughed without humor. "I walked away from a woman once. She needed someone. I had reasons I still use for excuse. I watched, and then I turned my back, because it was easier than being the man who fails. I never forgave myself." She looked at him, and for the first time his guard fell into something human. His shoulders lowered like a curtain easing. "Why tell me this now?" she asked. "Because you remind me of her," he said. "You remind me that apologies don't fix things unless they change what comes next." That was the pivot. It made everything else a consequence. They began to speak with the fragile honesty people use when they are learning how to trust a voice again. He told her about land sales and mortgages, and how his father had signed promises with a pen that didn't mean what it said. She told him small things about the road, how the wind smelled different in towns where men learn to be softer, how soup tastes like salvation when someone else remembers to add salt. They met in the space between chores and the clink of a spoon in a bowl. It was not fireworks or melodrama. It was a turning of pages. Curiosity pulled through the household in thin threads. Why had Lena left a town where whispers clung to her skirts? Why had Dane kept his name off the signboards in the county fair? People make a life of assumptions. The ranch made a life of work. Lena began to sleep a morning that wasn't full of questions, but was open to the idea of rest. She began to teach the cookhouse boys how to fold dough into smiles rather than grumbles. She began to set a small table with a second place for a man who didn't think he deserved it. There are love stories that explode like gunpowder, and others that begin like slow steam. This one was the latter. It moved through acts of domestic repair. A chair mended, a letter written to a creditor, a parcel paid with cash counted beneath flour sacks. Dane kept opening his ledger the way a penitent might go to church, awkward at first, then with a steadier hand. One afternoon a man from town came by, a thin-faced broker who measured everything in coins and future claims. He wanted the alley behind the barn for a store, a deal that would swell Garland Ranch into a different kind of ledger. Dane listened and then said no. The broker's reply was a small sneer. People like him think the world is a chessboard and people are the pawns. When he left, Lena noticed Dane's posture relax a degree she hadn't seen before. He did not say why he refused. He simply swept the boots at the threshold and went on tending things that needed tending. Winter softened into thaw. Spring set the sky on a different hinge. Lena and Dane stood on the porch one morning, watching the land unroll itself like a reopened book. Ellen knocked a jar of jam onto the counter and laughed hard enough to make the whole room bright. The men who once murmured now asked Lena for advice on the stew, and she gave it to them with a patience that felt like a stitch. He took her hand one evening as the sun slid away, not with a question, but with the intention of belonging. She didn't pull away. She did not throw herself into trust as if it were a cliff. She took his hand like you take a hired horse, slow, careful, judging the strength of the grip. When he pressed her palm to his chest, it felt like an apology and an offering rolled into one. Their wedding was small, a bench under a cottonwood, and neighbors who had come because they liked the wholesome sight of two steady people making a life. Ellen wept a little when Lena tied the ribbon around her wrist. Dane read a small note he had written in a hand that trembled until the day it steadied. They did not promise heaven. They promised to keep the fire lit. The Garland Ranch did not become a story in the papers. It became a place where bread rose and children learned to whistle. It became the kind of home that does most of its miracles in silence. Lena taught apprentices the art of hospitality that heals. Dane opened his ledger and, more often than not, closed it in favor of a walk in the fields. If you ask why this matters, it matters because the deepest offers people make are often not what you expect. A job is a wage and a schedule. But sometimes behind a roof that needs mending, a man offers a chance to be seen. Sometimes he offers, with clumsy hands and late apologies, the work of being human. Years later, when the paint had been stripped of wormwood, and the porch spoke in grooves that remembered every footfall, Lena and Dane would sit in the dusk and count small things. The jars on the shelf, the children who learned to bake on Sunday, the ledger that, more often than not, stayed closed on purpose. And when someone asked Lena how it was that a woman who once thought life had nothing to offer found home without trouble, she would smile and say this: "I asked for a job. He offered me a life. It is deeper than either of us could name.